I was very honored that NASA chose me to be the first woman.
This is a momentous day in my life.
There are no doors we cannot unlock.
Historic firsts for women throughout the years, and 2014 is no exception. 2 more women jumping into the national spotlight just this week. Our expert panel weighs in shortly, but first, here's ABC's Rebecca Jarvis.
I'd like to introduce your new CEO effective next
Mary
month.
Barra becoming the first woman ever to run a car company, making General Motors the largest female-led business in America.
I do.
Please be seated.
And Janet Yellen confirmed this week as head of the Federal Reserve, making her the most powerful person in charge of our nation's economy.
Both Mary Barra and Janet Yellen, they don't have any heirs. They just get the job done.
Barra, a homegrown talent who started at GM in 1980 inspecting Pontiacs coming off the assembly line.
Automotive it's kind of in my blood.
Since then, she's become a force within GM, overseeing manufacturing and completely overhauling GM's car designs. Fortune naming her one of the 50 most powerful women in business. Barra, one of just 23 females running Fortune 500 companies, joining women like Hewlett-Packard's Meg Whitman, PepsiCo's Indra Nooyi, Yahoo's Marissa Mayer, and Xerox chairman and CEO Ursula Burns.
What do they have in common?
They're not the girly companies. We have a woman running America's largest automaker. We have women running America's 2 largest tech companies. We have women running 2 of the largest defense companies.
And now, 100 years after it was founded, the Federal Reserve getting its first female leader, Janet Yellen, earned a PhD from Yale before going on to run the San Francisco Fed, where she famously flagged concerns about subprime mortgages.
It's kind of the classic story of how a very smart woman gets ahead. Keep your head down, disagree quietly, don't look to get press about it.
Until now, when Yellen and Barra both step into the national spotlight. For this week, Rebecca Jarvis, ABC News, New York.
Thanks to Rebecca. Let's dig into this now with our experts this morning. Liza Mundy from The Atlantic, author of The Richer Sex. Reshma Saujani, founder of Girls Who Code and author of Women Who Don't Wait in Line. Carly Fiorina, former chair and CEO of Hewlett-Packard. And Colonel Jeannie Leavitt, the first Air Force female fighter pilot and the first female fighter wing commander, now overseeing about 5,000 people. Jeannie Leavitt allowed me to be kind of the backseat driver on a flight recently in her F-15. Thanks for that. It was pretty thrilling. Carly, though, I want to start with you. When you were named the CEO of Hewlett-Packard so many years ago, there were 7. There were 7 female CEOs in the Fortune 500.
That's correct.
A lot of progress since then, but what has to happen now?
Well, clearly there's been a lot of progress. I was the first woman to lead a Fortune 50, and as you point out, there were only 7. Now there are 23 big major companies, and you have women assuming absolute top positions of power and authority in industries and politics as well, and yet the data overall hasn't shifted much. So, for example, we have less than 20% of elected officials are women. We have less than 20% of corporate officers are women. That number hasn't changed in decades. And women remain the most underutilized resource in the world and the most subjugated people in the world. 70% of the people living in abject poverty are women. And so while there's great progress on the one hand, there's insufficient progress on the other. I think we have to change our mindset. I think this is no longer simply about equality or diversity or inclusiveness, although that's very important. I think it's now a question of enlightened self-interest. Women are an underutilized resource. We need all the brain power, all the smarts, all the heart we can get to capture our opportunities and solve our problems. And when women aren't fully utilized, as we clearly still are not, we're leaving opportunity on the table and we're leaving problems unsolved.
Colonel Leavitt, I want to go to you because there is really no profession that could have been harder to break into than the fighter community. testosterone. It was the era of the Top Gun movie, all that glamour, all that power. Listening to male leaders on the Hill, they were saying this will ruin the military if we let female aviators come in. I want to take you back about 20 years when they first presented you to the press.
I realized that not every person wanted this to happen. Some did, some didn't. But I also realized that at this point it's pretty irrelevant.
As much as you probably hate looking at those old hairdos, how did you do it? What was your mindset? I remember, because I covered it back then, that they were trotting you all out as these new great women. Men didn't like that so much in that community.
You're right, Martha. There was a lot of resistance to women flying fighters. That community had been male-dominated for many, many years. And so there was a lot of resistance at first. They didn't want things to change. And that was the fear, is that everything was going to change and that women would be there just because they were women. I think the Air Force did a great job of opening up the opportunity, but not forcing women into that career field. And so women had the opportunity, and if they were competent and had the abilities, then they were able to go into that.
And that's what you did. You just basically put your head down and flew airplanes.
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of advice you'd give others, I'm sure. Russia, let me turn to you and just talking about moving forward. What's the biggest problem? And do we have to change how we talk about this? I mean, there have been these great leaps for females, but what happened?
I think we need a new playbook. Like, I'm interested in whether Mary Barr is going to pick a successor that's a woman, whether she's going to make her team more female. To me, women are powerful. 20 million of us make hiring decisions. We make up 60% of America's wealth. You know, 85% of all consumer purchases are made by women. We're 34% of middle management. What are we going to do to uplift one another? We have to hire one another. We have to promote one another. We have to vote for one another. We are the majority, and we have to start acting like the majority. I think that's the question, because I really believe that sponsorship is the new feminism. What we do for one another, how we elevate one another's leadership. That's when we're going to see a difference.
Liza, what has to happen as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think what we see now with women who are being elevated to these really top offices is that we can accept now culturally women as leaders. We can, and that's a big change in the past 20 or 30 years, accepting women in positions of top leadership and power. I think we need to look at what's going on in sort of the middle areas and what's keeping more women from reaching to the top. We need to engage men in the conversations.
And men in the housework.
Men in the housework. And there are a number of states now that are passing paid maternity and paternity leave laws so that men are encouraged to get involved in the home, to get involved in child rearing and child care from the very first stages. That changes the dynamics in the home permanently and enables women to spend more time in the workforce. 60% of our college and university students now are female, and we need to harness all of this talent and all of this training and preparation and education and keep women in the workforce.
Carly, is there any part of you that when you look at statistics, I think it's 15% female law partners, and this is a kind of a touchy question, are women avoiding that? Are women making these choices on purpose? Are they saying, you know what, I do want to divide my time. I do want to have a richer, fuller life and not climb this ladder?
Well, I think it's clearly true that women still have a heavier burden in terms of making those difficult choices around work-life balance. That's clearly true. But I also think that now what we're up against are the real powerful forces called the status quo. And the fact that people are more comfortable with people like themselves. So if you have a male power structure, men are more comfortable with people like them. Men. Women are still perceived as a greater risk. I think the most important thing is for women to be able to choose, to have the opportunity to choose the life they truly want to live.
Very quickly, tell me what you would tell young women today who you mentor. Very quick advice.
I would say to do your best and don't take no for an answer. Just absolutely strive to reach your dreams.
Russia?
Fail fast, fail hard, fail often.
Yeah, persevere, expect setbacks, and don't blame yourself for the setbacks.
Do the hard stuff. Take a risk, take a chance.
And I'd say, keep a sense of humor. Absolutely. You're going to have to. Thanks, everyone. And don't miss Rebecca Jarvis and her exclusive interview with GM CEO Mary Barra. That's tomorrow on GMA and World News. We're back after this. And now we honor our fellow Americans who are serving and sacrificing. This week, the Pentagon released the name of one soldier killed in Afghanistan. That's all for us today. Thanks for sharing part of your Sunday with us. Check out World News with David Muir tonight. Have a great day.